If you have hypothyroidism and you're trying to lose weight, what's the best diet? That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode.
Welcome to She's Healthy, a podcast for ambitious women on their journey to become the healthiest version of themselves. I'm your host, Lori Aikman.
Welcome back to the She's Healthy podcast. We're going to dive right in. Today, we're talking about hypothyroidism. We've been in a hypothyroidism series. So if that's you, if you have a thyroid problem and you also have gained weight and you're trying to lose weight, today we're talking about what's the best diet for you to use in order to do that. First, I have to quickly give you my medical disclaimer. My name is Lori Aikman. I am a nurse practitioner in the state of Florida. I am the founder and CEO of Crown Executive Health, where we help busy professional women regain and sustain their energy through functional medicine approach to hormone balance. And I do have to just let you know this podcast is for informational purposes only. So please do consult your doctor, your provider, your practitioner before you make any changes to your healthcare plan. But use this podcast, for informational purposes to help you make those decisions. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. So first thing we have to talk about is there a best diet for hypothyroidism? And the first point I want to make is if you are in the United States, if you are in a more industrialized country, westernized country, most likely if you have hypothyroidism, most likely the cause is Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroid disease. Okay. So what we see is that in the more third world countries, we see the most common cause of thyroid problems is iodine deficiency. So I'm in the US, I'm in Florida, we have iodized salt. And we get plenty of iodine. That is not a cause of hyperthyroidism. Most causes, like upwards of 90% of hypothyroidism, is actual Hashimoto's, or that autoimmune thyroid disease. And why this is important is it's going to affect how we eat, what we're going to do. Okay. So what we have to understand about autoimmune thyroid disease is that what's happening, autoimmune means your body is triggered and your body is attacking itself, right? What we see when somebody has autoimmunity is they have antibodies, right? Typically they have antibodies against their own tissue. So in the case of Hashimoto's, is somebody has antibodies against their thyroid. They have thyroglobulin or thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Okay. And so the immune system is being triggered to, again, fight against the thyroid. Why that's important is because the foods we eat can also trigger our immune system. Okay. So if we have hypothyroidism in the US, I'm just going to say, for example, I'm going to assume most of you are in the US. I apologize those of you that might not be in the US. But if you do have that autoimmune thyroid disease, right, your immune system is triggered. And so one of the things that we want to do when it comes to a diet, even for weight loss, is doing things to help reduce inflammation and reduce that inflammatory response, keep your immune system from being triggered. And a big way we can do that is by removing the big inflammatory foods. So if you do just a quick Google search, you may find that it's recommended that people stop eating gluten if they have hypothyroidism, especially Hashimoto's. So there's 5 or 6 top inflammatory foods. Those are gluten or wheat, dairy, soy, corn, eggs, and sugar, if I'm not mistaken, right? Those are typical foods that are, well known to induce inflammation and trigger that immune system. So removing gluten, removing dairy, those are like the 2 big ones typically that I do recommend with people. But removing maybe corn, maybe soy. Some of this can be nuanced. Like some of you might not have a problem with corn or soy, but a lot of times I just had a call with a patient this morning and he was telling me, yeah, I know I don't do well with dairy and I don't do well with soy, right? So a lot of times, like you might have already discovered that, like, oh, whenever I eat this, I feel terrible, right? So removing any foods that are going to be triggering your immune system. If you eat a normal diet, you don't restrict at all, maybe just start with removing gluten. And the goal with this, it's not that removing that food, because I know there's lots of people out there that have like, oh, I went gluten-free and I didn't lose any weight. Um, in this instance, it's not that removing the gluten or removing the dairy is gonna help you necessarily lose weight, but it's gonna help to lower those antibodies, decrease that inflammation, decrease that immune response, which is going to help your thyroid to function better. I just realized I meant to start with a story. So one of the first clients that I worked with in my practice a couple of years ago now, I've been in practice as a nurse practitioner since 2011. This was when I started Crown Executive Health. It wasn't called Crown Executive Health at that time, but back in 2022. So one of the first clients that I worked with, was struggling to lose weight. She was postmenopausal. She was in her early 50s, struggling to lose weight, even though, as she said it, she was the healthiest person in her house, right? She ate better than everyone, she exercised consistently, and she just couldn't lose weight. Okay. She did have a family history of hypothyroidism, but her labs, when she had gone to the doctor and had her labs tested, her labs had been normal, right? She didn't meet criteria for hypothyroidism. She wasn't on thyroid medication. But what we saw is that when she came to and worked with us, we do a full thyroid panel, which does include thyroid antibodies. We saw that she did have Hashimoto's, even though her thyroid was technically still functioning normally. So her TSH was in range. She had very high thyroid peroxidase antibodies, to be specific. Oh, I just kicked my tripod. Sorry about that. So, and I want to say hers were over 200. So if any of you have had thyroid peroxidase antibodies drawn, like when you're getting into the hundreds, right? That's pretty high. 200, 300, 400, up from there. That's typically very high. So what that means is your body is producing a lot of antibodies to that and this enzyme, thyroid peroxidase. And what thyroid peroxidase does is it helps with converting your thyroid hormones to the active form. So again, we use a functional medicine, approach in the conventional medicine setting, they might go, oh, you have antibodies, you have Hashimoto's. Okay. And then that's all they might say, like, okay, yeah, that's great. But what we find is that, okay, so if this antibody is attacking this enzyme and it's inhibiting the conversion of your thyroid hormone to the active form, then what we actually see is that when we reduce that level of antibodies, people feel better, their thyroid functions better, because that enzyme is allowed to work, right? That the antibodies aren't keeping that enzyme from working, which is making that thyroid hormone, converting that thyroid hormone and making the active thyroid hormone. So with her, and for instance, we did remove gluten from her diet. When we did a few other things I'll talk about in the next point, but that did help. When we actually retested, I want to say 6 months later, her thyroid antibodies were like under 100, very, very low, under 100, maybe in normal range. I can't remember off the top of my head. And she was able to lose weight because we got her thyroid. And what we're doing there is we're also keeping her body from getting to the point where she does need to be on levothyroxine or Synthroid, right? We're keeping her thyroid function working well by lowering those amount of antibodies. Okay. So one of the things, so that point one was, again, you likely have Hashimoto's if you have hypothyroidism. Point two was removing inflammatory foods. Maybe the first one, if you've not removed anything, is starting with gluten. And this is just allowing your thyroid to function optimally. Okay. And then number three, third point I want to make, and what we did with her, what we did with this client I'm talking about, was when you have hypothyroidism, it sets you up and makes something work, insulin resistance, something called insulin resistance worse. So if you haven't listened to any of my other podcasts before, I talk a lot about insulin and blood sugar and regulating, cortisol function, things like that. So one of the things that we have to do, so when you have hypothyroidism, excuse me, whether it's primary hypothyroidism, whether it is Hashimoto's, this sets you up for being more insulin resistant, which means your insulin doesn't work as well. And so your body makes more insulin, which causes you to store fat. Okay. So this is what happens like when somebody's like early stages of diabetes. This is what's going on. You're in that pre-diabetic state is that you have higher insulin. So what we have to do from a diet standpoint too is things to reduce or lower your insulin and blood sugar levels in order to help you lose weight. And there are three big things that I recommend with all of my clients in order to do that. In fact, today we are having a masterclass, 3 steps to fail-proof fat loss. I will put the link below in the show notes. And we're hosting that in our Facebook group. We do have a free Facebook group where I do these free monthly master classes. I'll just put the link to the Facebook group in case you listen to this like a month later. You can just join the Facebook group and then you'll see the post when we have our monthly master class popping up. But okay, so let's get back to, so when we've got to then lower blood sugar and insulin. And one of the top ways we can do that is through our diet, through what we're eating. And as you can guess, lowering carbohydrates is a great way to do that. So the less carbs, especially less like simple sugars, so less desserts or things like that we eat, then the lower our blood sugar is going to be, the lower our insulin is going to be. It's not just, and a lot of times people tell me, well, like, I don't even eat sugar a whole lot, right? It can be just increasing the amount of protein, increasing the amount of healthy fat in order to lower our blood sugar. I just wrote an email about this the other day. What you don't want to do, and what sometimes people will make the mistake of, like, if you've tried, let me know, maybe send me a DM or maybe comment below if you've tried the keto diet and it hasn't worked for you. So a lot of times when people think low carb, they think, okay, I've got to go keto. I've got to go, 30 grams of net carbs or less a day, like really restrictive. And what happens in this scenario is a lot of times for a lot of women with hypothyroidism or women in general, even if you don't have hypothyroidism, is when you're going that low carb, that, keto low carb, is that it's a stressor on your body. It's going to drive up cortisol and it's also going to decrease your thyroid function. So there's kind of like this perfect balance of lowering your carbs to help improve your blood sugar and insulin levels, but not lowering them to the degree that it's a stressor on your body and you're making your adrenal function, cortisol, production, thyroid function worse. Okay. So I realized like that's not really a very specific answer, but it's something with any diet when I'm working with our clients or within chronic executive health. I think a lot of times we think, okay, there's this like perfect macro ratio, like tell me exactly what to eat and that's the diet that's going to work for me. And what we find is that your body's going to shift, and what works for you now might not work for you later. And we might have to shift, or your metabolism may improve and we change your goals. We change what you're doing, a month in, 2 months in, based on how your body is responding. So overall, a good way to lower carbs without necessarily like going, oh, okay, I'm eating a low carb diet is just increasing the amount of protein. A woman, again, another client we spoke to yesterday was saying that was, just increasing the amount of protein that she was getting at each meal, helped her energy levels, helped her feel more satisfied. And she was naturally, because of that, eating less carbs. Okay. So again, I guess summing it back up is that point one was if you have hypothyroidism, it's likely Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is autoimmune thyroid disease. And what we have to do in that instance from a diet standpoint is to lower inflammation. One of the big ways you can start to do that, if you haven't already, is removing gluten. And then the third point is that improving insulin resistance, lowering blood sugar and insulin levels are key in order to get that weight moving. And one of the first things you can do is just decrease the amount of carbohydrates that you're getting in by increasing, like, eating a ton of, eating a good amount of protein, getting lots of veggies and fiber in your diet, are really going to be key in order to do that in a way that doesn't necessarily require you to like count calories or count carbs, things like that. So I hope this was helpful. Again, we're going to be diving into this in detail more of those 3 steps that we take our clients through in order to lose weight. Again, it's 3 steps to fail-proof fat loss. So I'll put the link to the Facebook group again below. Make sure you jump on and you join that. We'll have the replay available for probably about a week after that masterclass is up, and then it'll go down, but then we'll have another masterclass coming up. So anyways, I hope you find these podcast episodes helpful. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear what you want to hear about. If there's a topic we have not talked about yet, I have some things planned, but I'd also love to hear what you want to hear, just so we can make this podcast and these YouTube videos as helpful for you as possible. All right, I will see you next time.